Thanks for joining me for part 2 of how to ditch bad writing advice. So last week we talked about 5 myths that you can let go, right? That you can use if they work for you, but if not, you don't freak out about it. You just use the rules that work for you and that help you become a better writer. So the first 5 myths that I shared last week, so again, I recommend going back and watching that video first, were the first one was to avoid all adverbs. I discussed why adverbs are not great, the reasons why and why that advice is given, but why sometimes adverbs will work and how you can use them. The second advice that I suggest you ignore is regarding prologues, and that is that you should either not write prologues or write very short prologues. And I talked about why you use them if they're important. The point is to write well, right? To write good stories, to write something that's compelling. Nobody wants to read a prologue full of backstory. So again, I recommend just watching that first video. The next one was not to use complicated vocabulary or sentences, and that is because people recommend, right, that we make, especially commercial fiction, easier to understand, that it's written for, third to fifth grade level. So it's not complicated to read when you're having fun, relaxing before you go to bed, go to the beach, whatever, right? But that, again, I recommend that you don't want to make your novel overly complicated or just use vocabulary just to practice your vocabulary usage, right? But you want to use vocabulary that is helpful to the reader to understand the story. And it depends on the type of story that you're writing. Some of it may use more simplistic vocabulary because you're either narrating maybe from the character's point of view, and it's going to depend on who this character is. Or maybe you do want to use more elevated language depending on if you're writing literary fiction or what you're writing. So you can't make a blanket statement about using simplistic language because not all stories are going to actually benefit from that. The fourth myth is that plot is more important than characters. I explain why. Really, I actually disagree with that completely, but that both are important, right? Plot and character make your story. They're both important. You want to develop both of them. And the fifth misconception is that you should plan and outline your story, and that you should not start writing until you have a solid plan. And we talked about why I'm a huge proponent of outlining and at least having a very basic outline to start with, but that it isn't always required, right? Because not every writer writes that way. And I suggested that maybe better advice is to have you try both. Try plotting and then try just writing your story without any plan at all and just letting the characters guide you, letting the story guide you and develop as you're writing, and see which one feels more comfortable to you, which one works better. So again, I recommend watching last week's video first, then coming back and watching this one. And today we're going to continue with the next 3 misconceptions that are often seen on books that are teaching you how to write, or videos or articles, blog posts. And we're going to take a look at those, see what I agree with, what I don't agree with, and my better recommendation for each one of those. And then we're going to end with just some last 3 tips on how to understand how to decipher these rules and how to choose the ones that work best for you. So let's get started.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Okay, the next myth, number 6, is do all your research before you begin writing, especially if you're a historical writer or somebody who needs to have a lot of information before you write, or you're writing a mainstream novel that requires a lot of research before you start writing. Writing books and writers who suggest that you do this want you to do this because they want you to be armed with all this information and all the facts before you start writing. That way you don't have to stop writing and pause in the middle of writing something in order to go research something. That if you have all the research done, it makes it a lot easier once you start writing. And the truth is that if you spend too much time researching, if you're just researching, you might be doing one of 2 things: procrastinating so that you are not getting your writing done, or over researching. You might not need all that information that you're finding. And if you are spending a lot of time researching irrelevant things, you're really not getting your writing done. So I think better advice is to research some. Maybe make sure that your settings are clear so you know where the story is taking place, what it looks like, things like that. Maybe certain events that you know are going to happen, if you need certain dates, or if you need whatever it is, that just the basics of your novel. So again, going back to outlining, this really helps because then you can put things in the right place, right? But just enough so that you can get your story going. And then while you're writing, if you find that, oh, I really needed to know if this car was around in 1992, I really needed to know, what colors they even come in. You might say, I want a lime green color for my car. You would never want that, but maybe you would. Do they make them in that color? Do they make them in a maroon color? I don't know. Then you might want to just, what I do is I just put like an XX, brown maroon color car, research, right? Or look up. And that way I don't have to pause my writing. I can continue writing my scene, but I know that I need to go back and now go find specifically that information, not just research every car that Chevy has made, but research exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, so don't get bogged down in research, and you don't have to research everything before you even start writing. The seventh myth is that your characters have to be likable. Boy, I'm really glad that's not actually true. I've heard editors say that they rejected books because the character wasn't likable. So you might think, oh, that means all my characters have to be likable. And I think that honestly, it's a flaw in our writing, especially genre writing, especially like romance writing, where we think our characters have to be likable. Well, obviously we don't want a jerk as the main character, because we as readers like to cheer for the main character. So if we have a heroine and a hero, they're eventually going to fall in love. We want them both to be likable, which is why people will say, make your characters likable. But we need to define what we mean by likable. So what do you mean by likable? Does every character have to be just like this Mary Poppins wonderful character? Well, no, that makes for a boring read. Your characters have to have flaws. And your characters don't have to be 100% likable. And also, they can actually have really bad qualities. What you need to do, though, is you need to make it clear why this character is how they are. Why are they robbing banks? Why are they doing something terrible that at the beginning of the book seems like nobody would fall in love with this character. Nobody would like this type of character. And there's so many books where it starts that way, right? The character has whatever negative quality you might think of, whether you have a misogynistic male character, you have, again, someone who's doing something terrible. Then there has to be a reason. I mean, there are certain things, obviously, that nobody's going to accept, right? You have somebody who's hurting an animal, hurting a child, doing something totally, reprehensible and evil. Well, then that is not going to be your hero. But the characters can have flaws. So the best advice is to create interesting characters. Create characters who have flaws, but they're complex. And there's a reason for the flaw. Something happened to them that made them do this. There was a book that I read with a heroine who offers her body to a guy, to the guy who ends up being the hero of the book. And why is she doing this? She's trying to make some money in order to feed her child. Obviously, it seems at the beginning, well, she's got no morals or whatever, right? Whatever we might think about her. But then we find out immediately why she's doing this, and that she's really sacrificing herself for her child, which makes her very likable instead of unlikable. So don't worry about creating likable characters. Create complex characters that have a reason for doing whatever they're doing in the book. Write a good story, and your readers will love your characters. The eighth misconception or myth is that readers don't have to read a bunch of writing books. They can just write. Okay, there's a lot of problems with that, because if you don't read up on skills, if you don't read on how to plot, how to write a good character, about motivating your characters, if you don't read the things that you need to read in order to become a good writer, and you just write, that's not really going to help you. You're just going to be writing poor stories. And I think the reason they tell you not to, you don't have to read these how to write books, you just need to write, is because they think, well, these are too prescriptive, and they give you a lot of advice that you're probably not going to use anyways, or a lot of advice rules that you're going to break, which is really what I'm telling you with this video, right? That every rule has an exception. Every good advice might be bad advice for you. But it doesn't mean you don't read any of these or you don't watch these videos, because there is a kernel of truth in all of the advice that you're given. Even if it's not great advice for you, there's something there that you can take away. The other thing is that you always need the basics. When you first start getting a degree in something, you're going to learn the basics. You want to be a math professor, you're going to learn by actually starting with basic math. You want to be, whatever you want to be, a scientist, you're going to learn with the basics. And this is what this is. You're practicing the basics. You want to be a sports star, you've got to do the same moves over and over and over again until you get good. And so with writing, it's the same thing. You want to read these guides and learn the rules, and then understand why a rule may not be good for you. Over time of using, it's like, okay, well, I've done it this way, I've done it this way, and it's really not working. I'm going to try it a different way. I'm going to try it my own way. I'm going to try it as a mixture of two different advice that I got. But you need that basics in order to start. If I want to learn how to cook, if I want to learn how to paint my house, and I'm going to watch videos and I'm going to learn the basics first. I'm going to understand how a professional does it. And then once I get good, I may change things up a little bit. Otherwise, I'm going to do it exactly the way they said at first until I learn and get comfortable and confident in my skills. So better advice is to read as many books as you can. Read all the writing guides, watch videos on how to write, internalize all the advice, even what you consider bad advice, and then determine what works for you and do that. And you'll find yourself returning to these books over and over again. I have so many writing books, and I occasionally will go back to them and say, okay, well, I'm really great at dialogue, but maybe I need to freshen up on something. Let me read this book again. And it's always enlightening because I end up remembering something that I'd forgotten, or wanting to try something again that I had done in the past, but maybe now with 10 years of experience, it'll be different. So my final piece of advice is to do three things. Once you get familiar with the skills that you need, once you've read many books on writing, many articles, blogs, watched videos, listen to yourself and pay attention to what works for you and how you write best. Second is learn from others. Take advice as inspiration rather than just considering it advice. If something inspires you, works for you, then do it. And the last is to stay flexible. Know that you're going to evolve as a writer over time. What you do in year 1 might not be what you're doing in year 5. If you allow yourself to grow, to try different things, to change over time, you might change. Again, I went from being a pantser to someone who outlines her novels, not in great details. I'm still not an over outliner. I don't have every little thing, every chapter, every scene, but I do have a pretty detailed basic outline. I do know what I'm going to write about, and I do know what all my not all my major plot points, and I know what my conflict is. I do know what my theme is going to be. I do know some of those major things that are important to me as a writer. Who knows? 5 years from now, I may go back to being a pantser, or I may become an even more detailed outliner, because you want to stay flexible. You want to continue to grow and learn as a writer. I hope that you have found this helpful, and that I've gotten my point across that you have to look at all advice. Some of it may not be good advice for you, and you have to determine that on your own. If this has helped, please hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channel, and that way you'll be notified with that little bell next time that I do have a video. Thanks again for being here. I appreciate it.